A man stands on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. The water laps at the shoreline, dragging small stones back into the deep. They read his parables as spiritual escape hatches from a broken world, and it is easy to read them that way if you live. The social status. The heavy Roman coins with Caesar's face stamped in silver, they lose all their gravity. You throw them away not because you are forced to make a miserable religious sacrifice, but because you have found a better currency. But Jesus is not done disrupting the economics of the empire, because in the very next breath, he changes the camera angle entirely. And the man holding the money is no longer a peasant in a dirt field. You spend your life appraising. You weigh your options. You polish your reputation. You hold your security up to the light. You are the merchant. You collect fine pearls. You gather a respectable title. You gather a comfortable income. You gather the approval of your peers. You gather the right political affiliation. You stack these pearls on a velvet cloth. You lock them in a heavy iron vault. You check the locks every single night. You feel the exhaustion deep in your bones. You feel the tight tension in your jaw. You smell the sterile air of the modern ladder you are climbing. You taste the bitter anxiety of trying to hold it all together. You are trading your actual heartbeat for an empire that does not know your name. The modern world is just Rome with better technology. It still demands your total allegiance. It still taxes your soul. Then you see it. One single pearl. It catches the light. It feels impossibly heavy in your bare palm. It is the regime of heaven, in a comfortable, modern society. But if you look closer at the dirt underneath his fingernails, at the specific political tension of first-century Judea, and the math changes instantly. The kingdom of heaven is not a spiritual addition to your busy schedule. It is the complete liquidation of your old portfolio. You cannot buy this pearl with your weekend spare time. You cannot add it to your existing collection of identities. You cannot place the sovereign rule of God on the same shelf as your earthly ambitions. The cost is absolute. The merchant does not negotiate. The merchant does not ask for a payment plan. The merchant does not diversify his assets. He liquidates. He runs to the market. He sells his reputation. He sells his need to be right. He sells his political tribalism. He sells his demand for control. He sells the heavy defensive armor he has worn since childhood. He empties the vault. He turns his pockets inside out. He stands in the dirt with completely empty hands. The culture tells him he has thrown away everything that matters. But he is smiling. This is the secret of the parable. Your surrender is not a tragedy. It is a transaction. You are trading a dying currency for a living one. You are trading a fragile reputation for an unshakable identity. You are trading the frantic hustle of the modern empire for the quiet defiance of the hidden kingdom. At the ears of the informants, standing at the very edge of that crowd, you start to realize something the Afterlife reading completely misses. But the hidden kingdom does not stay hidden forever. The seeds eventually grow. The leaven eventually rises. Jesus moves his eyes from the dirt of the marketplace, back out to the deep water of Galilee. And the final image he casts alongside the empire is a warning that changes the timeline of the entire world. Jesus gestures out toward the deep water of the Sea of Galilee, pointing at the heavy, wooden fishing vessels hauling their loads against the fading daylight. The thick hemp ropes cut deeply into the wet, calloused hands of the fishermen. You can smell the sharp tang of brine, the rotting seaweed, and the metallic scent of wet scales piled high on the wooden planks. The heavy dragnet breaches the surface, breaking the water with a chaotic, thrashing violence. A dragnet is not a delicate instrument of precision, carefully cast to catch one specific type of fish. It is a massive, weighted wall of woven rope that drops all the way to the dark floor of the lake, dragging blindly through the unseen depths and sweeping up absolutely everything in its path. It pulls in the valuable and the worthless, the living and the dead, the clean and the unclean, tangling them all together. The kingdom of heaven is not an evacuation plan. It is an invasion strategy. Jesus is not standing on a boat giving a quiet, in the exact same inescapable enclosure. The fishermen do not stop to inspect the catch while they are still struggling against the current of the deep water. They simply heave the immense weight forward, pulling it relentlessly toward the shoreline, where they will finally sit down on the dry stones and begin the slow, deliberate work of sorting the good into baskets and throwing the bad away. The religious elite, standing on the fringes of that crowd, would have recoiled at the sheer theological messiness of this image. They spend their entire lives trying to prematurely sort the clean from the unclean. They want a regime that only targets the pure, a net that somehow actively rejects the broken, the sinful, and the politically compromised while it is still submerged. But Jesus tells them to wait for the shore. The kingdom of heaven is not an exclusive religious club checking carefully curated invitations at the door. It is a sweeping, indiscriminate net, pulling the entire volume of human history toward an unavoidable shoreline. The Roman Empire believed it controlled the borders of the known world, building stone walls and setting up heavily guarded checkpoints to dictate exactly who was allowed to participate in their civilization. But Jesus is telling this crowd of oppressed, exhausted laborers that God's regime is operating silently beneath the surface of the waters. Theological lecture about eternity. He is announcing a rival government. He is speaking to an occupied people about a new world order. Right under. It is moving invisibly through the depths of their present reality, completely ignoring the artificial boundaries drawn by Caesar, and gathering everything toward a final accounting. The sorting does not happen on Rome's schedule, and the judgment is not handed down by a human magistrate sitting on a marble tribunal. The dragnet is moving through the deep right now, gathering up the oppressors and the oppressed alike. But what happens when the net finally breaches the surface of our own century? Pulling our modern systems of power into the blinding light of day, look at the empires of the present. They do not use marble pillars. They build glass towers. They do not march with iron shields. They lay fiber optic cables. They manipulate interest rates. They manufacture outrage. They harvest your attention. This is the modern Basileia. This is the new Rome. The names change. The machine remains. It still demands your total allegiance. It still requires a sacrifice. In the first century, the informants stood at the edge of the crowd, holding wax tablets. Today, the informants live in your pocket. You feel the cold, hard glass of your smartphone at 2 in the morning. You stare into the artificial blue light. You hear the deafening, constant roar of a 24-hour news cycle. You taste the metallic edge of anxiety in the back of your throat, the noses of the empire that currently holds the swords. If he speaks plainly about overthrowing the powers that be, the Romans will arrest. The empire tells you that you are losing. It tells you that the world is collapsing. It tells you to stockpile your resources, arm yourself, and defend your territory at all costs. It runs entirely on the fuel of human fear. But the mustard seed is still in the dirt. The zume is still fermenting the dough. Jesus is still standing in the wooden boat. He is still casting a parable alongside the frantic noise of the modern world. The kingdom of heaven is not a historical artifact we study. It is a present insurgency we join. You do not fight this empire by matching its volume. You do not overthrow it by adopting its weapons. You fight it by liquidating your investment in its currency. When you refuse to hate your political enemy, you are committing treason against the algorithm. When you give your money away in a culture obsessed with accumulation, you are subverting the economy. When you choose quiet obscurity over digital fame, you are striking at the root of the system. This is not passive withdrawal. This is active sabotage. The empire wants you terrified. The empire wants you divided. But all over the world, beneath the concrete and the cables, the hidden government is expanding. People are forgiving the unforgivable. People are sitting in deep, unbroken silence. People are trading the heavy iron chains of modern ambition for the staggering freedom of the pearl. Him for sedition before the sun goes down. So he wraps his treason in agriculture. He hides a political revolution inside stories about dirt. The regime is quietly changing hands. And when you look back at the entire scope of what Jesus promised on the edge of that water, you realize the revolution is not waiting for a future date to begin. A man casts a tiny seed into the dirt, and the cedar of empire is quietly outgrown. A woman hides bitter rot into heavy dough, and a feast for a village rises from the dark. A laborer strikes a hidden chest in a rented field, and joyfully liquidates his life for what is inside. A merchant inspects a single, heavy pearl, and empties his iron vault to buy his true identity. A farmer leaves weeds tangled in the green wheat, and trusts the slow patience of the coming harvest. A massive net scrapes the unseen bottom of the deep and pulls the weight of history toward an inevitable shore. And a rabbi sits on a wooden boat under Roman occupation and announces a treasonous regime that will outlast Caesar's ghost. Same parables. Same revolution. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the dirt under that laborer's fingernails. And seeds. And bread. Rome built its empire on massive marble pillars, iron shields, and the gold plundered from conquered kings. They understand blunt. He does not make his sacrifice out of religious obligation. He doesn't sell his coat because he is forced to. He does it laughing. He does it because the systems of the world suddenly look incredibly cheap once you have finally seen the treasure. If you are in a season where the empire of the present is taxing your soul, where the constant, frantic hustle for reputation, security, and control has left you completely exhausted, Jesus is offering you a different currency. You do not have to fight the noise by getting louder. You do not have to conquer the field. You just have to be willing to sell the heavy armor you have been wearing to buy the one thing that actually lasts. If this opens something in you, subscribe, leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by the modern machine. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who hides his revolution in seeds and bread walk with you as you step out of the empire and quietly bury his unstoppable grace deep inside your actual life force. They understand the heavy strike of a hammer on an anvil. They understand power you can measure in marching legions. But this rabbi does not talk about swords. He holds up a tiny, dark mustard seed, rolling it in the palm of his calloused hand. He tells, a crowd presses in so tightly that he has to step into a wooden fishing boat just to keep from being crushed. That the new order will not look like Rome. It will look like this. Small, buried, almost invisible. He is telling them exactly how the old world will fall. But the detail that changes how you read every single one of these stories isn't in the soil. It is hiding in the two Greek words Matthew used to record the moment. We read Matthew chapter 13 inches English, and it sounds safe. It sounds like church. We see the words kingdom and parable printed on thin paper with gold edges, and we associate them with stained glass windows and quiet Sunday mornings. But in the first century, those words did not sound religious. They sounded like a death sentence. Look at the phrase Jesus repeats over and over again on that shoreline. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is like..." The word translated as kingdom is the Greek basileia. If you were standing in that crowd, feeling the damp Galilean wind on your face, you knew exactly what basileia meant. It is the exact word the ancient world used to describe the Roman Empire. It is not a mystical realm of disembodied spirits playing harps above the clouds. It means sovereign political rule. It means the regime. When Jesus announces the basileia of heaven, he is standing inside the occupied territory of Caesar. You can hear the damp wood groaning against the mooring ropes. You can smell the lake water, the dried sweat, and declaring the arrival of a rival government. He is committing verbal treason, and he knows the informants are listening. You can almost hear the sharp scratch of a stylus on a wax tablet as the local authorities take notes. So he uses a very specific kind of camouflage. Matthew tells us Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. We have been taught that a parable is just a simple moral story, an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, designed to make complex ideas easier for uneducated people to grasp. But the Greek word is parabole. It comes from two root words, para, meaning alongside or beside, and balo, meaning to throw or to cast, to throw something alongside something else. It was a rhetorical device used to make a subversive comparison, without explicitly triggering the tripwires of the ruling class. You do not use a parable to make things perfectly clear to the authorities. You use it to hide the truth in plain sight. You throw a story about a farmer scattering seeds alongside a truth, about how empires actually fall. The Roman informant writes down a story about agriculture. The oppressed Galilean hears the blueprint for a revolution. The parables are not simple moral fables. They are encrypted resistance literature. Jesus is using parabole to describe the basileia and the crushed reeds under thousands of leather sandals. He sits down on the wooden planks. He looks out at the faces of people. He is throwing coded stories alongside a rival political order to protect the listeners while he builds a movement. And the very first image he chooses to describe this new government is an absolute insult to every king who has ever sat on a throne. Jesus speaks across the water. The wind carries his voice over the crowded shore. He tells them, "The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed." Every listener in that crowd knows the ancient scripts. They know the prophets. When Ezekiel describes a mighty empire, he points to the cedar of Lebanon, a massive trunk, thick bark rough to the touch, roots cracking solid stone, branches piercing the sky, eagles nesting in its heights. It is a monument of pure dominance. It casts a heavy shadow over the earth. That is how the world builds a kingdom. Rome uses swords. Rome builds arches. Rome raised pillars. Jesus rejects the cedar. He chooses a weed. He points to the mustard plant. It is not a majestic tree. It is a sprawling, messy shrub. It is aggressive. It is chaotic. It grows low to the dirt. A Galilean farmer does not plant it on purpose. It is invasive. It takes over the garden. It spreads underground where the Roman guards cannot see it. It disrupts the neat, controlled rows of the establishment. And once it takes root, you cannot dig it out, who are taxed to the point of starvation. These are tenant farmers who have lost their ancestral lands. These are fishermen whose daily catch. The kingdom of heaven is not a towering monument of dominance. It is an uncontrollable invasion of grace. It does not conquer from the top down. It subverts from the bottom up. It looks weak. It looks common. It looks like a seed you could easily crush under a heavy boot, but it is entirely unstoppable. Then he tells another story. A man sows good wheat. An enemy comes in the thick black of night. The enemy sows weeds. The sun rises. The rain falls. And the two grow up together. The roots intertwine. The green stalks tangle. You cannot pull the weeds without destroying the wheat. The farmhands want to rip the weeds out immediately. They want to cleanse the field. But the master says to wait. Let them grow together. Let the harvest sort it out. Rome demands the instant eradication of its enemies. Rome sends soldiers to crush dissent before it sprouts. The zealots in the crowd want the exact same thing. They want a violent uprising. They want to pull the Roman weeds out of Judean soil by the roots. They are waiting for a Messiah to hand them a sword. Jesus tells them to put the sword down. The new government does not pull weeds. It outgrows them. Patience replaces violence. Endurance replaces armed rebellion. The kingdom of heaven is not a swift military purge. It is a quiet, steady maturation, is heavily tolled by Herod's tax collectors. They are governed by a Roman machine that lines the main dirt roads with crucified dissenters. The informants write down stories about shrubs and stalks of wheat. The peasants hear a promise of ultimate liberation. But Jesus does not stop in the dirt of the field. He turns his attention to the women standing at the edge of the crowd. He moves the revolution from the garden to the kitchen. And the next image he uses would have horrified every religious leader on that shore. In Matthew 13, verse 33, Jesus delivers a one-sentence parable that sounds like a cozy domestic scene to a modern reader. He says the kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. To us, it smells like fresh bread baking in a warm kitchen. The word translated as leaven is the Greek zume. It refers to a small piece of fermented dough saved from an old, sour batch, left to rot, just enough to make the next batch rise. But in the ancient world, fermentation was not viewed as a culinary triumph. It was viewed as a biological breakdown, a literal process of rotting and decay. To a first-century Jewish ear, Zume was universally understood as a symbol of moral corruption. Every spring at Passover, families would light lamps and scour the dark corners of their stone floors to sweep out every microscopic crumb of leaven, just to make a point. And to this crowd of occupied, exhausted people, he begins to speak about a kingdom. It was a physical reenactment of removing sin from the community. Years later, when the Apostle Paul writes to the church in Corinth, he leans on this exact cultural anxiety, warning them that a little leaven leavens the whole lump when confronting unchecked malice in their congregation. Leaven was the ultimate, universally recognized symbol of impurity. And Jesus stands on a boat, looks at a crowd of deeply religious people who have spent their entire lives trying to remain pure, and tells them that God's new regime operates exactly like the rot they are commanded to scrub from their kitchens. The kingdom of heaven is not a pristine, isolated sanctuary. It is a contagious, unstoppable infection of grace. If hearing the subversive reality behind these familiar stories is upending how you read the text, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the woman presses her bare hands into the flour. She does not sprinkle the zume delicately on the surface. The text says she hid it. The Greek verb is eggcrypto, the exact root where we get the English word encrypted. She aggressively folds the fermentation deep into 3 measures of flour. That is roughly 60 pounds of raw dough. Most people assume the phrase, "the kingdom of heaven," is a synonym for the afterlife. They assume Jesus is giving them a description of, "It is enough to bake bread for over 100 people." It is an absurd, massive, communal feast. The kingdom works its secret way through the heavy, dead mass of the world's systems until the entire structure is agitated, expanded, and transformed from the inside out. The mustard seed and the encrypted leaven show how the hidden empire expands, but the next 2 stories reveal what it actually costs to step inside. A heavy iron hoe strikes dry earth. The sun beats down on the back of a day laborer's neck. He is working a plot of land that does not belong to him, turning soil for a landlord who barely knows his name. He swings the tool again. But this time, the sound is wrong. It is a dull, hollow thud against wood or clay. He drops to his knees in the dirt. He digs frantically with his bare hands, soil caking under his fingernails, pulling away jagged rocks and tangled roots. And there, buried in the dark earth, out of sight of the tax collectors and the legionnaires, is a treasure. He opens it. The wealth inside is staggering. It is enough to buy his freedom, his family's freedom, and the freedom of everyone he loves. He does not run to the landlord. He does not declare his findings to the local magistrate. Where the soul goes when the body fails, a distant realm of perfect peace, entirely separated from the dust and the blood of human history. He pushes the dirt back over the chest, smoothing the ground with his calloused palms until it looks exactly as it did an hour ago. And then he runs. He runs home, breathless, his heart hammering against his ribs. He gathers everything he owns, his tools, his meager furniture, his ancestral inheritance, the very cloak off his back. He liquidates his entire life. He sells every scrap of his existence for a handful of coins, just enough to meet the asking price for that specific, unremarkable plot of land. His neighbors think he has lost his mind. His family assumes he is throwing away the tiny sliver of stability they have managed to scrape together under Roman occupation. But the text says something crucial. It says he does it in his joy. He is not grieving his lost possessions. He is not mourning the sale of his coat. He is practically laughing as he hands the money over to the landowner, because he knows something the rest of the world does not. He knows what is buried in the dirt. The kingdom of heaven is not a religious tax you pay to appease an angry God. It is a hidden reality that cheerfully bankrupts your attachment to the old world. When you see the regime of heaven for what it actually is, the systems of empire suddenly look incredibly cheap. The ambition,